to go through some of those best practices in regards to setup in the back end of the system. So there's a few things that for myself, when I'm actually auditing a system to ensure that everything is set up correctly, again, for best reporting, is a few items in the back end. So first of all would be your billing rates, making sure that those are set up cleanly, and that there aren't any like issues or just little mistakes that have been made back there, as well as your cost rates. And there are two different types of cost rates in the system. There is your estimated cost rate card, which is a blended cost rate that can only be used at the estimating level, so that it gives you an idea of what your potential cost could be on a piece of work, as well as your actual cost rates. And this is associated to the individual staff members that you have, and it would be their hourly salary. And we usually recommend also adding in a percentage of your overhead so that it can be accounted for, and that will be tracked as each timesheet is tracked by the individuals. So I'm going to quickly show you where all these items are. They're through your admin system. So if any of you don't have access to this, usually only the primes within your system will, but usually on a topic like this, we usually have mostly primes. So to get started, I'm going to take a look at the service rates and markups. So to get there, you go admin, rate and staff management, service rates and markups. And this is just going to take you directly to the different billable rate cards that you have within the system. If you have any questions in regards to actually entering in services or the different rate cards themselves, please reach out to us. We'd love to have a chat with you about that. But I'm going to kind of start at this stage, which is any changes that you might need to make regarding your service rates per rate card. This is the best page to do it on. So you'll see here we have client management as our example. With the client standard rate, it's at $100. The discount rate, you're actually not going to charge any money at all for that, and the higher rate, it would be at $120. So these different rate cards are actually applied directly at the estimate and are decided at the beginning of the workflow or life cycle of these pieces of work. So things I always like to point out are making sure that items that say are $0 are actually $0. So this will signify to the system that you want it to be a non-billable service, specifically for this rate within the system. So for any reporting regarding that, it will show that it is at a $0 rate. Something like errand, you'll see that that is $0 across the board, except for this cost rate card, which I will touch on in just a moment. So whenever you're entering in new rate cards, come in here, do just a little sweep through, making sure that everything is exactly how you want it to be. All of these rates will be picked up by timesheets and ultimately pulled through to all of your reporting later on. So I can't stress enough making sure that this is clean and exactly how you want it to be. Now, on top of this, we have our managed staff rates. So there is a way to technically override these different rates within your system, and that is through the managed staff rates. So if you were to override a specific individual to have a different rate than the service rate, this would be the page that you would do it on. And for our example here, we have a lawn savvy who, again, for that client management, although our service rate is $100 an hour, we actually want a lawn to bill out at $150 an hour. So this amount here would override that $100. But you'll also notice down here with errand that we've left this box blank, and that is to show that we want it to still pick up that service rate of $0, still keeping it at a non-billable rate. Now, I know I went through that super fast. Again, just very high level. I do see Laura kind of making eyes at me, so maybe I'll just quickly check in and just make sure that there isn't any crazy confusion on this.
No, I didn't know I was making eyes at you there. Yeah, not too many questions coming in just yet, so it sounds like you're doing a great job, but definitely just a reminder, send through any questions as they come up. I'm here to answer them.
Sorry, I guess I got distracted. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So again, any questions, please don't be afraid. You'll notice that you can change each individual just along here on the left-hand side for any changes that might need to be made. So the next item I want to touch on is those costs. And quite a few, actually, I think like 2 of the 3 reports I'm going to show in the back end today have a lot of cost information on it. So you will actually want to make sure that this is filled in correctly. So the first one I'm going to show you is that actual cost rate card, and that is for estimating cost. So that is actually on that last page that we were on previously. You'll see this cost rate. It's a cost rate card. And what we usually recommend here is just putting in a blended cost rate. So again, that would be all of your staff salaries with your overhead broken down to an hourly amount. And you would just put that across the board. We actually do recommend still putting those in on your non-billable items because, of course, there is still a cost to you to have an individual running errands. So you would still want to account for that. And where that will show up will be directly on an estimate when you're building it out. So if I were to quickly go to an estimate, and we do touch on this quite a bit in the effective estimating webinar, so you should be able to view more there. But if you were to come in here, you will now see this cost column where it will start picking up those estimated costs for you for, say, research in this example. So again, that's just for estimating. When individuals are actually tracking time and tracking timesheets, that is directly on the individual itself. So for that, you would come into admin, rate and staff management, staff stats, rates, and permissions. And we'll keep with the, we'll just click in. Well, actually, no, let's keep with Alon today. So when we click into Alon, this will actually come to like his general staff information, and where you'll actually now notice this hourly cost item at $25. So as Alon tracks time and puts timesheets against active work in your system, it will track not only that billable rate for the client management, the example we had previously of $125, $100, no, sorry, $150 an hour. I'm just forgetting what was in there for a second. It will also track the hourly cost of $25 an hour so that you still have that overview of what you estimated, what the billable actuals were, and then what the actual cost is to have Alon working on those pieces of work or that specific service for that piece of work. So this would be where you would put that in. Again, we do recommend that it would be the hourly wage that your staff makes with a percentage of the overhead. We can make sure that that document is actually included in our follow-up email today. So if you need any help calculating that. Okay, awesome. So something else I also just want to mention that has actually come up in past webinars on, especially after touching on the costs here. We can make sure through permissions that staff don't have access to cost rates within your function point. So no need to worry with that. It's easily done through permissions, so we can easily shut that down. And what that will either do regarding specific reports, it will either make the reports unavailable to them completely, or it will actually just remove the information in that column on specific reports. So again, if you know you're not opening up costs to your staff, which is pretty normal, we can make sure that that's removed and that they won't be able to see it. Okay, cool. So before I move into the reporting, I'm just going to check in with Laura one more time. Anything that you think I should add to, or are there any questions at all?
Not really, but I actually did just have a question come in here. I'll just read it quickly. It might be worth answering on screen. So yes, we do have one from Brandy, and she's asked that they don't currently have a cost rate category. So if she creates one, will it automatically apply to all existing and future estimates in the system?
Good question, Brandy. Usually it won't work retroactively. If it's the estimated cost rate card, I believe it should work for any open estimates that you currently have. But if it is the individual hourly cost example Alon here with this $25 an hour, it won't work retroactively. However, you can choose to update timesheet costs here. So if you were to click that, you would be able to choose a start date. For a lot of people, you know, we're in March already. Maybe you want to start it for your fiscal year that started in January. You could push it back that far, and it will apply those hourly costs against all timesheets that Alon had applied. You will need to do that for each individual, but it will update all of those. But normally within Function Point, any changes that you make won't work retroactively unless you physically like click a button and tell the system to do it. So I hope I was able to answer that for you, Brandy. If if you need any help with that, again, reach out to your customer success manager, or we'll reach out as well to kind of go through that in greater detail with you. All right, great. Laura, if there isn't anything else, then I will just quickly, I'll keep going.
Yeah, back to you.
Okay, awesome. So now what I want to touch on is kind of the three main aspects of reporting within Function Point. There's sort of three ways that we can report. The first, of course, is through all of our finds and our lists and managing columns options. So I'll review those, as well as I'm going to show you a few of my favorite of our kind of canned reports that we have in the back end. And then, of course, our dashboard reporting options as well that kind of give you a high-level overview of what might be happening before you actually start digging into specific reports to get some more data. So the first option I'm going to go through is building your own reports ultimately. And, you know, I say that loosely because there are still some limitations to it, although in most cases I can usually build the kind of reporting that people are looking for through these options. So what you'll notice within all these modules here within your function point is that you have these find, view, and add options. And through each of these finds, it will then produce lists for you. And in each of those, you can manipulate and create your own reporting. I'm going to go with jobs today just because that's the most commonly asked one, and it actually has the most data available and a few items that I would like to point out to you today. Now, through these finds, you can actually search by absolutely anything. So this will just help you narrow down the report that you're looking for. So for example, if you're wanting to search by a specific company at all, maybe you're just wanting to see everything that American Express has asked of you for the last year, you can easily pull reports based on that. Something that not a lot of people are actually aware of, but is one of my favorite little features in the system, is actually being able to search by date ranges. And you'll notice a few different date options here on the screen. We've got the delivery date, we've got the creation date, we've got the close date, we've got revision date. There's lots of different date options. But one of my favorites is actually the delivery date. And this is a field that you can fill in when you first start creating your estimates. We recommend entering in the date that you would expect this piece of work to be closed. So in status meetings, you can easily pull any jobs that you would expect to be done in coming up and making sure that it's on target for that. But searching for date ranges, maybe I want to see all of the jobs that I expect to be delivered within this month. So what you can do is actually March 1 and then just put 3 dots. In March 31 and tab out, and then that will automatically populate that for you, and you can then search by either, and this is actually really important to point out, so you can either search by find active or find jobs. So if you search by find active, that will only pull jobs that are currently open or active within your system, where find jobs will pull everything, even jobs you've maybe closed or invoiced for. So that is a bit of a difference. Maybe just for today, I'm going to choose to find active. And I wanted to do this just because it shows a bit of a smaller list, and so we're not going to get overwhelmed today. This job list that is being produced just right off the bat, this is just our default. So it'll show you the numbers, the job numbers, companies, if there's a project related to it, the name, which of course is hyperlinked to connect directly to that job if you need, type, status, that delivery date for yourself, as well as some of the financial values. So we've got the estimate, actuals, variance, invoice, and then of course the difference here as well. Now within this, we can now change this up. So if there is any different financial data or information that you're wanting, we can actually change that through manage columns. A pretty common question I get is actually related to expenses and maybe what the cost of expenses would be specifically on jobs. And we can pull some data related to that directly in this list rather than needing to go through and actually do an external expense find as well. So there is some pretty cool options in here. So let's kind of get started today. We're going to manage these columns and see what we can play with. You know, just for some of this, I don't actually need this financial data. We want to get a little more specific. So what I am going to do, just for the example of the external expenses, what we can do is we can actually estimate what we can pull the estimated external expense amount that we had planned on using. Then what you'll notice is that we've got the actual EE cost and the actual EE dollars. So the actual EE cost should pull your external expense cost pre-markup, and then the actual EE dollars will be the external expense billable amount. So I'm going to pull both of those, and then we can actually see the invoiced external expense amounts as well. Pulling a little bit of everything there for you. And then what we can do is move some of these around. All of this is editable, so maybe I'll just move this. I want the estimated at the front. We've got the invoice there. Perfect. And again, there's still lots of other options. Maybe if for some reason financial reporting isn't your thing, but you wanted to attend this webinar today, you can also maybe just do all of the hours related to specific jobs. The date description is always a great field to include as well. So come in here, have some fun, play around. There's lots of options for different columns that you can include. So we'll save those columns, and now you'll see those changes that have been made to the report so far. So we've got all those estimated external expenses. And then as you can see, we actually haven't put many actuals for the external expenses against some of these jobs yet, but we can see which ones we have. So based off of that external cost, we can see that one of them, a couple of them, we've got some dollar amounts against, and then of course the difference in the billable versus that cost for you. And then what we've invoiced for regarding that external expense. So it gives you a nice little overview there. All right, now once we've pulled the data that we're actually looking for and we have it living on this screen, we have a couple of options in regards to exporting it out of the system. So you'll notice that we have our print option. So that will either print it in a PDF form. So if you want to print this off, you'll see that we've actually got the filtering parameters up here, and then everything is just columnized for you. And then we have all the totals at the very bottom of the PDF as well. Now, I do get a lot of feedback from people, like this is great, but I really just want it in Excel so that I can still keep it living on my my desktop. So that is also an option here as well. You'll notice the CSV option. So you can either choose to export current view, so that will be everything that we have in here, or export all data. So that will pull absolutely everything living in the system for you. Now, I will fully admit that I am not an Excel guru, but there are lots of agencies that I work with that are excellent at working with Excel. And what they will do with a lot of these Excel dumps is then create their own formulas or macros that then will be able to sum or create additional reporting. So what is great about Function Point is that you can have these data dumps and then continue to build and manipulate the reports as you need. So that is certainly something that I highly recommend everyone take a peek at. If there's something that might be slightly missing, 9 times out of 10, we can probably pull the data for you, and then you can manipulate it as you need. So if there is any specific data that I haven't pointed out today for some reason, again, please reach out to our success team, and we will help you in pulling that data for use like that. Now, regarding an item like that, a pretty frequently asked question is actually reporting or time spent at a specific service. Now, we don't have any canned reports in the back end of the system that really offer this, but what you do have the ability to do, and what is one of my favorites, is the exact same process we just went through here with the jobs, but it would be at the timesheet level. So if you were to choose to find timesheets and say you're wanting to figure out all the hours spent against all of your services within the last month, what you could do is actually search by work date. So it would be March 1 to today, and it will now pull all of the timesheets that have been submitted into Function Point during that time. It will include the service along here, and then what you can do is actually export this option into an Excel document for yourself, and again, create those formulas to be able to create totals based off of those services and the number of hours that were applied to those services. I have seen a report that one of my agencies has built, and what it is it's just a pre-made macro that they drop all of this data into, and it will calculate all of that for you. So it's a really great way of kind of being able to, again, pull and manipulate that data for yourself. Okay, Laura, just checking in again. I see a couple of questions coming through. Anything that you think we need to touch on screen, or anything that you would want to add to kind of what I've touched on?
No, I think he's doing a great job. Not too much coming in. I'm doing my best to kind of answer most of them via the question box here. Sophie's just giving me the look that no one was able to hear me there. So yes, it sounds great, Sophia. I think most questions I've been answering just via the question box there. So keep on going.
Awesome, thank you. I also just like to check in with you because it allows me to take a sip of water, because when all I'm doing is talking for this long, it's always fun. Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to jump into is some of our canned reports in the back end. I'm going to touch on two for sure, and if we have a little bit more time, I'll touch on a third that are some of my favorites to be looking at. If any of you on the call have talked to me before, we've probably reviewed them. So a couple of the great ones, of course, live in this report section. So if you click into here, there are lots of different options. Now, for a good high-level overview of the financials of your jobs that will also include costing information is the profit analysis. Now, the gross profit is also a good one. However, there are a few limitations to this one, just in regards to job statuses. And it also spits itself out as a PDF. Something that most of you will probably notice is that with our reporting, there are PDF options as well as Excel options. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have a way of changing the PDF options into Excel options, or the Excel options into PDF options. That's something we hope to change in the future, but just something I like to point out. So for myself personally, I prefer the profit analysis report because it's not as finicky with the job statuses, as well as it does spit itself out in Excel for you. So if we were to open this up, you will notice a few options here. We can filter by office, company, project, job, as well as date ranges. So the date ranges, what it will do is it will pull only the data that's actually been applied to your work within that date range. That's also kind of an interesting thing. So if you do filter by the date range and you're like, these numbers aren't right, it could be because there were maybe timesheets or expenses applied to those items that are outside of the date range that you put in. Other options, of course, are pulling by specific job statuses. So if you're only wanting to see those things that are open, or if you're only wanting to see those things that have been invoiced or closed recently, you can also filter by those as well. Now, just because I want this report to be a little bit smaller, I'm going to filter by just what's happened this year. So we can just do Jan 1 today. We'll filter by that and spit this out. So what I hear from a lot of customers is that they like the look of this report, but they don't necessarily understand all the different headers. So we're just going to kind of review this at a high level today. What you'll notice when you come into this report, and maybe I'll actually zoom in a little bit so that it's, there we go. It's broken out by the individual companies. So we've got American Express, and then, of course, the different jobs that are within that. And you'll also notice the totals for those jobs in the companies as well. So maybe a better example would be this Great Atlantic Assurance here for you, because there's a few jobs in here with those totals rather than the one at the start. But that is how it will be broken out in regards to the jobs and the companies. What you'll then notice is we have the estimated internal cost. So that is then broken out by billable time, non-billable time, external expenses, and internal expenses. So this feeds back to those items that I was talking about at the beginning of the item. So that estimated cost rate card that you would want to build with that with the blended cost rate, this will be the section that will feed into. Then we have the billable time and the non-billable time. So that is, again, connected to the first billable cost rates, or the cost rate cards that we were, sorry, why am I saying cost? Just the rate cards that we started from at the beginning. And if those services have a billable amount against it, it will feed into the billable time. If those services do not have a rate against it, it will pull into the non-billable time. So that's just something always really important to point out. It will break it out by that for you. And then, of course, the internal costs that are associated to those services as well. So that will be broken out here for you. So we've got the estimated internal cost, and then we have the actual cost to date. So again, this is based all off of the timesheets and the expenses that have been applied to those jobs. It is again broken out by the billable time, non-billable time, external expenses, and internal expenses, and then the total for you as well. So we have all of these within that section. And then once we have looked now at the cost items, we're then going to actually go into the billable items. So, sorry about that. So next we have the estimated billable. So those are all of, as you're creating your estimates, I hope that everyone is actually estimating the number of hours and billable amounts that you would expect for the piece of work to take. It's always a benefit so that you can compare it to the actuals later and see if you have a profit and be able to utilize a report like this. So please do. And again, that will be now broken out by time, the external expenses, and the internal expenses. We do combine the billable and non-billable at this time options here because we would expect the non-billable to be $0, so it shouldn't actually affect the billable amounts in here. And then, of course, it goes into the actual billable, so same situation, time, expenses, and then the totals for you. And this, of course, will be based off of any timesheets that have timesheets and expenses that have been actually applied now to those pieces of work. So really important to make sure that people are staying on top of their timesheets and inputting expenses. The next is the invoice to date. So any invoices that you have applied against those jobs, and if you're billing off of actuals or estimated, it will still pull here. So the amount that you've invoiced based off of time, expenses, internal expenses, and then of course the total invoiced to this point as well. Now what we're going to go into is actually some of the formulas that the system will automatically spit out for you. So we have the invoiced versus estimated for you to start. So that's the variance between the invoice and the estimated and the percentage there. We have the invoice versus actuals. So again, the invoice versus the actuals and that variance. And then we've got the estimated profit. So what this is calculating for you is the estimated billable minus the estimated cost. So again, as long as you have estimated for that piece of work as well as entered in that blended cost rate card, that is where this is going to calculate from. And then what we have is the potential profit loss to date. So this is the actual billable minus the actual cost. So again, as long as you've entered in the actual billable rates, the actual cost rates, and then of course had individuals track time and expenses to all of your jobs, this should be tracking accurately for you as well. And then of course the profit loss itself is the invoiced minus the actual cost. So again, as long as everything's entered correctly in the back end and individuals are tracking time, all of this data should pull through for you pretty accurately. So this is a very valuable report as long as everything is done correctly in the back end of the system. All right, Laura, I do see you typing away frantically on some questions over there. Is there anything kind of that you think would be really good to touch on in regards to this report at all?
Yes, actually. So I've kind of frantically been typing away as you've been covering exactly what I'm trying to type out here. So we did have one question come through that was about what is a good report to look at if we're billing by actuals to our client for a specific job. So one thing on this report that would be useful that you've already touched on is looking at that invoice versus actuals column. So being able to compare how much you've invoiced to what was the billable value of my time and expenses on that specific job. So obviously we can see in this case For that first job for American Express, we've got negative 2,600, so we haven't billed for the full value of our actuals. So looking at that column, there's a lot of information in this report, but even just trimming down, coming in and looking at that specific column would give you a bit of insight there. Anything you'd like to add on that, Sophia?
You know what, that's super great point, Laura. And then of course, what's still available to you in here as well that's a great question, is you'll notice the invoice totals here. So you can actually see what that invoice total was versus the actual billable was as well. So if you're not trusting what our document's saying, you can also do a little bit of math yourself as well. So all those options are available to you in the report.
Good point. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions at all that you think we should touch on?
I think that's all we've got for right now.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go into my next favorite report now. This one is a little bit prettier. I know that sounds kind of vain of me to say, but it's a little bit better to maybe bring to certain meetings, just because it is a little more visually appealing. And it's our estimated actual and invoice dollar by company, project, and job. Something I do want to kind of point out is that if any of you have changed your terminology within Function Point, for example, you've changed estimates to quotes, or jobs to projects, or projects to campaigns, that will also reflect in the title of this report as well. So again, projects to campaigns, it will say estimated actual invoice dollar by company, campaign, and job. So just something to note, it is still there. It just might look a little bit different. But this one also spits out as an Excel document for you as well, and there's lots of filtering options. The only mandatory thing to fill in is actually choosing what job status you would want to pull it by. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull all the open jobs that are currently living in my system. But if, say, you wanted to pull all of your invoiced or closed jobs with that data date range option again, you can pull it by that. But I'm going to just keep it simple today and pull this. Just stretch this out so everyone can see. Okay, great. So this is organized in a similar way. Again, we've got the company, if there is a project associated to it, and then of course the individual jobs underneath that again. So it will still organize by job number to start, job name, job status, work type. You don't really see work type pulled through to too many reports, so it's actually really handy having it on here. And then of course some of the project information will also pull through, which is handy. Now, also what's helpful here is the date description. This is a field directly on the job that is yours to use and play with as you wish. So if there's any notes that you would want to be pulling through to items like this, those options are there for you. Now, what's great about this report versus the profit analysis report is that this will actually pull through just a little bit more data in a different way, minus that cost information. So it actually pulls all the different hours for you. So the estimated hours, actual hours, and of course that variance. And then it will break it out by, and of course Excel just never wants to slide easily for me. There we go. It will then break it out by the estimated service, that estimated expense, and then of course the total estimated amounts that you have. And then it will break it out again by the actual service, actual expense, and total actuals. And then we do have some of the different formulas here for you. We've got the total actuals versus total estimated, what you've invoiced to date at this point, the total estimated versus the invoice, the total actual service versus the invoice, and then the total actuals versus the invoice. So the actual service will only be the time trackable services so any timesheets that have applied against the jobs versus the invoice, and then the total actuals will be the timesheets as well as the expenses for you in there versus the invoiced amount. So this one, again, great report, shows you a lot of good financial information. It just doesn't include that costing information, so it's maybe a bit easier to share amongst your team that needs some financial information, but don't necessarily need to get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual cost to your organization. All right, I don't see Laura frantically typing, so I'm not going to check in this time. But Laura, wave at me if anyone needs anything. Okay, cool. So I'm going to close this one out. Now, there is one more report that I think we do have enough time, so I'm going to quickly touch on it, and it's the billable hours recovered by client. This one also pulls a lot of costing information in it. I'm not going to dive into this one too deeply. If you want to look at it more specifically for your information, we can definitely look at it. So this is filtered by specific date range. Again, I'm going to just stick with this month, so that we can keep it a little bit smaller, but if you need to filter it by specific client, specific job, or staff person, you can do that. Now, this is broken out by each of your clients, and then each of the jobs that you have underneath that as well. So what you'll notice is it does start by first breaking it out by the client. So we've got American Express here, and then the different jobs underneath that. And then what it will be broken out by is those estimated totals for you. So we've got the total, internal services, the internal hours, the expenses, and each of those items will be broken out. And then what's interesting is the time that's been tracked to it now to this point. So it will show each of the individuals that are working on the job, the hours that they've spent, the billing rate that they would be billing out at, the billable amounts based off of the hours and the rate, and then, of course, that costing information that you've put into now in the back end of the system. If there's been any invoices created for the job that have been applied against those timesheets, the profit loss, as well as that variance for you as well. Now, again, it will also give the totals for you at the end as well. And something I did want to show to you, and of course, based off of, oh no, okay, so here we go. So for Home Depot here, you'll notice that we've got these invoice amounts that are against the timesheet. So what I kind of want to point out in regards to this is when you are creating invoices and applying them against a job, they will still, whether you're invoicing based off of actuals or estimated. If you're billing off of actuals, of course, that's going to pick up an invoice for that actual amount, or so any time that has been tracked against the job. If you're still billing off of estimated, it will still actually pull an invoiced amount to technically apply against those timesheets to account for what's been invoiced and what's been tracked. But what you'll notice here is that we've got that invoice total, and then we still have this unspecified internal service amount here of $7,632.74. And what this is if you were to say invoice prior to actually starting this piece of work for a specific amount that hasn't been applied to those timesheets specifically, it still will account for that invoiced amount on here so that you can see in the totals, it will still total it for you. So that's just something I kind of always like to point out. And then if you were to have multiple jobs underneath this one client, it will then total everything for you as well based off of that client. So that's actually a pretty handy dollar amount to have available to you there. Now, I know I went through that pretty quickly. This report can be pretty meaty and have a lot of information in it. What I would really recommend is just come on in, take a look at it, really kind of get used to seeing it. And then if you have any questions, of course, please reach out to us. I did get the wave from Laura, so there must be a question. How can I help?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we've had a question come in from Melissa, and the question is, on this report, you can specify a start and end date. So she's just wondering what this means, and I have to admit, I didn't see if we have the date range on the filter when we pulled this. So does this mean that it's only including timesheets within these dates, or is it just looking for jobs that are active within that date range that we've entered?
You know what? Really good question.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's by the data by chosen, yeah. So it should be the data date range based off of this up here. But you know what, really good question, Melissa. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, and I'm gonna double check that and maybe follow up with you. If you don't mind just giving your email address and the agency you work for, and I can make sure that a follow-up happens. But my gut is definitely data date range.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, cool. So we are running on about 15 minutes left of time. There's no more canned reports that I really want to jump into. But what I do want to touch on before we kind of move on is the dashboards. I'm sure all of you, as you log in, you've already seen our default dashboard kind of giving you some of the job information, but what's also available to you is actually some pretty good reporting. So I created this one just ahead of time, but these are some of what I find are our most valuable tiles that are available to you for just quick high-level at a glance reporting when you log into your system. So the jobs by company status, this will pull your 5 top companies based off the number of jobs you have for them, and it will tell you how many jobs you have within your budget, how many jobs are within 80% of your budget, and how many jobs are over your budget. So this, again, will all be based off of your estimated amounts that you've put in there, because, of course, that will be your budget. But what you can do with this, of course, is change some of these options. So if you want to do clients all jobs, you can also do a custom selection based off of maybe your top clients that you maybe feel like you need to monitor a little bit closer. And then of course the percent budget, maybe you only want to check within 90% or within 70%, be notified a little bit earlier. So all those filtering options are available there to you. The next one is the profit summary. So this is basing everything off of what you've invoiced, what the cost is for those jobs that you've invoiced, and then of course the difference that you have in there. What you'll notice at the bottom is that it's basing it off of invoiced and last month's date. But again, you still have those filtering options for you as well to change the job status. So, you'll notice that there's either the job status of invoiced or closed. So if you're actually an agency that manually closes your jobs and doesn't necessarily invoice based off of a final invoice, which will automatically change your job status, you can make those changes. The date range, you can change to last month, the last 30 days. You can put in a specific date range that you're looking for. And then of course the cost calculation, you can do it from the invoice or from the job financials. So that is all available to you. And then what you'll also notice here is the bar graph. So this is based off of the internal services, the internal expenses, and the external expenses. So based off of the invoice, we know of that $143,994.59. The internal service amount is $119,376.25. So that's all available to you there as well. Again, with the cost difference and then the difference between those two. What we then have is the job summary. So this one I always usually recommend managers have in front of them, just based off of how many jobs are open, how many jobs are due. So that due is based off of that delivery date, and then how many are late. So again, based off of that delivery date, how many have gone past that date. And then you have the budget itself within there as well. So how many jobs are still within budget, how many of them are within that 80%, and then how many have gone over. Again, you can change the filtering in here. You can always see what your filter is at the bottom, but if you want to make any changes to that data, you can make those changes. And then of course, we have the exact same with the task time summary. So how many open tasks we have, due, late, and then everything that is within the estimated or within estimated 80% or overestimated. Again, we can always change this 80%, so you can make those changes through the settings. And then of course the timesheet summary. So based off of all the time that has been tracked within your system, we've got the total hours worked, how much of that is non-billable, and how much of that is billable. Again, that's all pulling from that first page that we looked at in regards to the billing rate card, and if it has a billable rate against it or a $0 value, which will then base this area off of it as well. So those are some of my favorite tiles. There's still lots of other tiles available to you as well. If you're ever wanting to customize dashboards, I have not come across someone who has broken how many you can have yet. So maybe challenge acceptance, see if you want to go have some fun and see if you can, but you can customize dashboards and pick and choose different tiles. Maybe you only want the timesheet summary with other items. So all of this is customizable. Go ahead and play around with it. All right, so now that was really everything I wanted to make sure we touched on today in this financial reporting webinar. Before I kind of go into what is coming around the corner in regards to our reporting, I'm just going to check in with Laura one more time. Again, it looks like she is typing frantically, so if anyone hasn't had a response response yet. Please give her time. She's definitely she's working it over there.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, I'm just getting back to sort of the last few questions that have trickled in, so thanks for your patience.
Okay, awesome. So now the fun part, what we have coming down the line. So I was able to connect with our product team last week, just in regards to some of the stuff they're working on. And what they're currently working on is a new reporting release to help our users to make better business decisions. And from the feedback that we have gathered from our customers up to this point, what we are hoping and what we're keeping in mind in regards to building is generating reports easily from complex amount of data. I know that there's certainly a few individuals I've worked with that have some issues just based off the amount of data that they have and being able to pull it all at once. So we're hoping to be able to make those changes. We also want to customize predefined reports. So I know a few of you sometimes find it frustrating with some of our canned reports in the back, and you want to be able to change some of the data in there. So we're hoping to make some changes there. Being able to save your favorite reports as templates. So with those job finds and lists that we had before, if you ever need to change that, you would still have to make those changes and you couldn't save it. So we're hoping to make those changes. Really, the goal is to minimize the manual effort for generating reports for you by saving templates and being able to reuse them in the future. So those are all items that we hope to have coming. Now, what we are looking for from you, of course, is because, we've had a lot of great feedback in the past, but as we are now building this, we do want to put a bit of a group together that can help us make sure that we're going the right direction with this. So we've got two opportunities for us to be able to work together on this. The first is actually going to be our validation calls. So what our product team is currently at right now is at their point, their proof of concept. So what they would like to do is actually validate that what they're building is going in the right direction for our customers. And what we're hoping to do is have these validation calls with about 12 to 15 customers to sort of make sure that, again, we're going in that right direction. So if there's anyone that is interested in participating in this, what I would like you to do, and actually hold on one second, don't do it quite yet. I'm going to tell you about the next stage as well. So the next stage would actually be our beta release. So once those validation calls have been completed, we're hoping a month or two after that to have a beta version to be available for some of our customers, as well as me. I'm hoping I get to play around with it as well. But a group of beta testers that can actually play around with it, make sure that, again, we're still going in that right direction, and what steps we should be taking after that. So we've got those two stages, the validation calls as well as our beta group. Now, again, with the validation, we're probably only going to interview maybe 12 to 15 customers. So if we are unable to talk to you, we can definitely make sure that you are part of the second group of beta testers. So what I would like from everyone on the webinar right now is, if you don't mind just typing into that questions box, yes, I'm interested, what stage you're interested in, as well as your email address and the agency you work for. I know some of you log in with different usernames, so I just want to make sure we have the correct individual. So please put on in there. Laura won't be responding to those, but that is going to be data I'm going to be compiling to provide to our product team for later on. So again, what I'd like is your name, your email address, the agency you work for, what stage you're interested in. So if you only want to do the beta but not the validation, please let me know. So just go ahead and enter those in. We are very excited about what is coming, and I'm also hoping to collaborate with our product team in the next little while for those that maybe can't participate in any of those stages in a webinar, so we can actually show you what's going on as well. So lots of exciting things coming down the line. We have been working really hard and kind of updating some of our code in the back end to allow for these changes. So we're really looking forward to it. And I think that was everything I wanted to touch on. Laura, is there anything I'm missing? Anything I'm forgetting at all?
No, that was great. And I have to say we've got quite a few people submitting their information to be involved with our product discussion. So that's great to see. Thank you.
That is awesome. Okay, so we've got about 6 minutes left. I'm going to give that back to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our financial reporting webinar. I hope you found some value in it. We'll stay on for another till the top of the hour in case there's any more questions coming in. But again, if there is anything that you maybe are still a little bit confused on, or you just think you need a little more help just specific to your workflow, please reach out to our success team at success@functionpoint.com, and we'll connect you specifically with your designated customer success manager to make sure that those questions are answered. And if you feel like there's anything in the back end of your system that maybe isn't set up correctly because your reporting's not looking correct, reach out to us on that as well. We're more than happy to take a look and give any advice that we can too. So again, thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you, Laura, for co-hosting. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next month at our QuickBooks Online Integration Best Practices webinar. Thanks, guys.